Baiklah Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati, tadi kita sudah bicara mengenai isu pengelolaan sampah dan tentunya ada isu yang juga tidak kalah menarik. Karena seperti kita ketahui kita mengalami krisis lingkungan hidup yaitu isu kualitas udara. Now, one of the DBS Foundation Business for Impact Grant awardee, NAFAS, has a mission that people need to be aware of the air that they breathe and the impact that the quality of air has on their health and their life. So let's listen to more explanation from co-founder and chief growth officer of NAFAS. Kita berikan sambutan yang paling hangat untuk Peter Jakubowski.
Selamat siang, ibu-ibu dan bapak-bapak yang terhormat. Terima kasih kepada DBS Foundation untuk mengundang kita hari ini untuk ngepresentasi sedikit tentang nafas. Jadi polusi udara itu memang bukan hanya masalah lingkungan tapi masalah kesehatan. Dan kalau kita lihat dari data World Health Organization, memang polusi udara itu adalah environmental threat nomor 1 kepada kesehatan manusia. Secara rata-rata, memang Global South-nya itu yang paling terpapar oleh polusi udara. Ini adalah data dari beberapa tahun yang ke belakang dan salah satu hal yang menarik itu adalah Beijing, China, itu yang dulu di urut 9, di tahun 2022 sudah tidak masuk top 20 karena sudah ada banyak polisi-polisi yang mengurangi polusi udara di daerah-daerah situ. Jadi NAFAS sudah membangun ekosistem kualitas udara terbesar di Indonesia. Dengan adanya 200 sensor kualitas udara yang kelihatan di map seperti ini, lebih dari 250.000 download, dan lebih dari 2.000 perangkat-perangkat monitor kualitas udara dan air purifier yang terkonek sama aplikasi. Hari ini sudah 15 kota di seluruh Indonesia yang ada akses kepada data kualitas udara di NAFAS. Dan dengan DBS Foundation kita rencana tahun ini untuk launching 5 kota baru di Sumatera, Kalimantan, sama Sulawesi. Kalau dilihat dari datanya, memang data kualitas udara itu manfaatnya banyak sekali. Dan dengan hampir 70 juta data points yang masuk kepada network kita, ada banyak analisa yang kita bisa melakukan. Nah, ini adalah data polusi udara Jakarta dari US Embassy sejak 2016. Hal yang menarik yang kita bisa lihat di sini adalah di saat pandemi polusi udara memang tidak membaik dengan cara yang drastis. Dan ini kita bisa konfirmasi dari data nafas yang memang gelombang datanya dan line chartnya hampir sama. Satu hal tambahan yang menarik itu adalah polusi udara adalah masalah di dalam ruangan. Jadi kalau kita lihat di animasi ini, garis hitam itu adalah kualitas udara di luar ruangan dan garis biru adalah kualitas udara di dalam ruangan. Ini adalah data dari sekolah TK dan ini adalah sekolah TK yang internasional ya. Bukan yang ada pintunya terbuka, ada jendela yang terbuka, semuanya tertutup, ada AC di dalam. Nah, polusi udara adalah yang kita panggilin life cycle health risk. Kenapa? Karena ada masalah yang jangka waktunya pendek, tapi ada juga yang jangka waktunya panjang. Dari ibu hamil sampai orang lansia, polusi udara itu memang adalah sesuatu yang menyentuh kehidupan kita. Nah, satu contoh, di tahun 2023, polusi udara di Serpong Tangsel itu seperti merokok hampir 1.000 batang rokok. Nah, ini adalah angka yang lumayan tinggi. Nah, dan satu hal yang dipikirkan adalah ini, untuk teman-teman yang perokok atau ada teman yang rokok adalah pilihan orang itu. Ini adalah udara yang dihirup oleh orang yang tidak ada pilihan, oleh anak, oleh lansia, oleh orang yang mungkin adalah ada sensitif kepada kesehatan. Nah, di tahun lalu Nafas munculkan salah satu kolaborasi dengan Halodoc, di mana kita mengambil data kualitas udara dan data telekonsultasi kesehatan. Dan kita lihat memang setiap kali PM 2.5 di Jabodetabek naik 10 mikrogram, jumlah konsultasi di Halodoc untuk masalah respiratory, asma, bronkitis, rinitis, influenza, dan lain-lain bakal naik 34% di dalam 48 jam, 2 hari. Nah, dari Nafas kita membangun ekosistem yang memang meluncurkan yang kita panggilin udara sehat tanpa mikir. Kenapa? Karena kualitas udara itu adalah sesuatu yang kita tidak pikirkan sehari-hari. Kenapa? Karena kita bernafas secara otomatis. Kita makan ada pilihan, kita minum ada pilihan, kita bernafas ya tidak ada pilihan. Ini adalah satu case study dari sekolah yang aku kasih data sebelumnya. Jadi kalau dilihat di sini, kualitas udara luar ruangannya warna hitam, dalam ruangannya warna pink. Dan ini memang kelihatan bahwa di saat polusi udara luarnya tinggi, dalamnya tinggi juga. Di bawah sini kita ada yang namanya good PM 2.5, harusnya kualitas udara di dalam sekolah kita, di dalam TK kita, di bawah sini. Nah, sejak ekosistem nafasnya dipakai, memang kualitas udara di sekolah ini di saat anak ada di sekolah memang bagus ya. Di luar waktu sekolah ya tidak usah ya, nggak ada anak, nggak ada guru di situ. Nah, clean air zone dan ekosistem ini bisa mengurangi polusi udara di dalam ruangan dengan angka yang lumayan drastis juga. Dan sampai sekarang kita sudah kerjasama dengan beberapa ratus perusahaan sekolah residential di Jakarta untuk mendampingi ekosistem ini. Nah, kenapa ini adalah sesuatu yang penting sekali untuk perspektif Indonesia Emas 2045? Karena memang paparan polusi udara dengan jangka waktu yang panjang itu bukan hanya merusak kesehatan kita, tapi merusak kecerdasan kita. Jadi kalau kita memikirkan generasi emas 2045, sekarang adalah waktunya untuk memang membangun lingkungan yang sehat. Jadi satu hal yang menarik ini adalah salah satu studi dari Harvard Healthy Buildings Program, di mana produktivitas orang-orang di kantor, ini bukan produktivitas blue collar ya di pabrik. Produktivitas orang di kantor bisa turun jika polusi udara dalam ruangannya di atas 15. Nah, untuk kasih satu contoh, hari ini tadi pagi PM 2.5-nya di luar di Jakarta itu di atas 100. Jadi ini adalah angka yang memang menjadi satu hal tambahan. Ada juga kerugian dari absensi dari kerja. Jadi di saat polusi udaranya tinggi, lebih banyak orang sakit. Kalau orang sakit produktivitasnya turun atau tidak masuk ke kantor sama sekali. Nah, kita sekarang sudah masuk mendalam musim kemarau. Dan untuk teman-teman yang ingat bulan Agustus 2023 tahun lalu, memang di saat musim kemarau ada banyak sekali orang yang masuk rumah sakit, ada banyak anak yang masuk rumah sakit, dan memang sampai menjadi isu yang diangkat oleh Presiden Jokowi. Nah, dengan grantnya dari DBS Foundation, kita ada rencana di tahun 2025 jumlah sensor di luar ruangan itu ditambahkan sampai 1000. Dan memang dengan data seperti ini adalah data bulan Agustus 2023, kita bisa mengatasi masalah polusi udara yang ini. Data dengan skalanya tinggi, ada manfaat untuk pemerintah dan untuk swasta juga. Yang pertama untuk emissions policy, yang kedua untuk health policy. Nah, dari sisi non-government, Nafas sudah bekerja sama dengan universitas untuk mengajukan advokasi sama riset antara masalah ini. Kita sudah kerjasama dengan University of Chicago, ITB, Universitas Indonesia, UGM, dan banyak-banyak yang lain. Nah, memang dari sisi datanya, regulasi sama measurement of health impact itu adalah sesuatu yang paling penting yang bisa dijalankan. Ini adalah contoh dari China yang sudah beberapa tahun, udah 1 dekade yang lalu membangun perang antara polusi. Puluhan ribu sensor sudah diinstal di China, di Beijing dan di Shanghai, dan memang ini adalah salah satu cara mereka bisa mengatasi masalah ini. Nah, terakhir kita bisa mengukur impact-nya kepada kesehatan, dan sudah ada banyak studi yang bisa meng-highlight bahwa alternatif kepada mobil, EV, alternatif kepada sumber energi, alternatif kepada perindustrian, memang mengurangi polusi udara, dan dengan polusi udara yang diturunkan, kesehatan negaranya dan kesehatan warganya bisa naik. Jadi satu hal yang mungkin bisa diingatkan bahwa polusi udara adalah sesuatu yang menyentuh kita semua, dan semoga dengan adanya data dan dengan adanya riset dan dengan adanya langkah-langkah seperti itu, lingkungan kita dan kualitas udara kita menjadi salah satu poin untuk menuju Indonesia Emas 2045. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih kami ucapkan sekali lagi kepada Peter Jakubowski, Co-founder and Chief Growth Officer of Napas. Baiklah hadirin sekalian, kami ingatkan sekali lagi sebelum kita masuk ke sesi selanjutnya bahwa Anda bisa langsung bertanya dengan cara menggunakan scan QR Code yang tersedia di meja masing-masing. Dan langsung saja selanjutnya kita akan mendengarkan keynote speech oleh Bapak Profesor Dr. Suhasil Nazara, Vice Minister of Finance. Kita berikan tepuk tangan yang paling meriah.
Very good morning, everyone. Colleagues from DBS, Excellency from the Embassy of Singapore in Indonesia. First of all, I would like to convey my congratulations to DBS for having this annual event, the Asian Insights Conference 2024. I think this is already like an annual event that a lot of the DBS clients and also a lot of the media and also the economy is looking for from time to time. And I'm honored to be able to speak before you all this morning with the topic that is chosen by the DBS, but basically what I'm going to deliver to you this morning is that what are the government thinking in this period of time during the period after the election, and what are our aspirations as Indonesian economy moving forward to the future. Ladies and gentlemen, as you might know that we have just completed our election, especially the presidential election, legislative election, and very soon, in the next couple of months, we will be conducting the Indonesian-wide regional election for the governor and also Bupati Wali Kota throughout Indonesia. I would like to convey to you as well that it is not only Indonesia that carried out the election this year. In fact, 2024, we can call it the super election year. Of course, US is, we are looking forward to what's gonna take place in the US, but no less than 60 countries in the world in 2024 actually conduct the election. So this is quite a huge number of elections that makes the 2024 as a country that is as a year that is very, very interesting when you look at from the political point of view and how the economy works. For Indonesia, if we are looking at how the economy works, it is, I think it's very, very natural to think that Indonesia cannot be separated from the world. And in the way how we look at the world, basically, if we look at the U.S., what happens in the U.S. right now is that the economy is moving strong along with the inflation. The monetary authority is trying to say that we have to come up with stability policy so that the reduction in the Fed fund rate that was coined last year, end of last year, probably is not going to happen in the near future. It's not going to happen very soon. The interest rate might be staying high for a longer time period. And of course, this is going to affect the US dollar, it's going to affect the Indonesian rupiah, it's going to affect our economy. On the other hand, European economy is on a different pace. A number of countries are in recession, and of course, the push for the growth policy is very strong. So, in terms of the interest rate, probably going to move in a different direction. We are looking what happens to the region. China is another spot in the world that probably going to be also slightly different. 5% economic growth aspirations, it seems to be on the pathway, but it's also because China is the major trading partners for Indonesia, it's going to affect Indonesia. What are we looking at in Indonesia? Right now, because of the world, there is a very turbulent period of time in the global economy. It is very important that for Indonesia to be to be ready. Now, let me jump directly to what I can tell you about the readiness of our fiscal position. Ladies and gentlemen, couple years ago, or not really couple years ago, 4 years ago, 2020, when we were under the COVID, when we started the pandemic or the COVID pandemic, it is very daunting. It was a very daunting period of time, and the fact that the pandemic is all over the world, the mitigation is also taking place all over the world. It is extraordinary policy that was taken by all over the world, by every single country in the world, and Indonesia is no exception. In terms of the fiscal policy, Indonesia, which is recognized as one of the very disciplined country with 3% fiscal rule, we expanded our fiscal position at that time, fiscal deficit, to 6.1%. And that is to say that during the pandemic, during the COVID pandemic, we expected that the government revenue will come down, but different from business sectors, spending cannot come down. If you are running a business, when your revenue comes down, then you try to be more efficient by lowering your spending. But in the case of a country, in the case of a state facing the pandemic, despite the fact that the revenue comes down, the spending must increase. And that is why the deficit increased in 2020. All over the world is taking that route in order to save the fellow citizen, in order to save the people. So you can see on the left-hand side the fiscal deficit of several countries, and Indonesia is one of the countries that expanded the fiscal deficit to 6.1%. You see some other countries expanding their fiscal deficit, but the message that I would like to convey this time is that Indonesia is one of the fastest economy that can reconsolidate our fiscal position. Last year, we finished the Indonesian fiscal deficit with 1.6% of the GDP. And it is a strong position that is recognized by the international community, so that Indonesia is not exposed to the risk because the majority of our financing are coming from the market. You can see that several other countries are still struggling to manage their debt situation and at the same time also manage the growth situation. It is very easy to connect that if the deficit is lower, then the growth cannot be higher. But I believe that because of the resilience of the Indonesian economy, we can improve our fiscal deficit from 6.1% of the GDP to 1.6% of the GDP without sacrificing the economic growth of the country. We have seen that the first quarter of 2024 this year, our economic growth hit 5.11% year-on-year basis, and there is a very strong foundation for the remaining years of 2024. For the 2024, we are still expecting that Indonesian economic growth will be around 5% with the expectations can go as high as 5.2%. And this is pretty much the rate of economic growth that are predicted by many international projection houses. So in this case, we are very comfortable, and I believe that the resilience of Indonesian economy in 2024 will continue to be able to produce greater than 5% economic growth. And it is also very, very encouraging to see how the economic growth has a positive impact on the labor market as well as the poverty rates. The open unemployment rate has been lower compared to the pre-pandemic level, and the proportion of formal and informal sectors is also improving toward the greater formal sectors. Poverty rates also declining, and inflation is under control for Indonesia. We do have to watch for the volatile food inflation. We had an increase because of the El Nino last year, but we are very comfortable if we are looking Indonesia and the middle of the comparing to other G20 and ASEAN 5 countries. Ladies and gentlemen, the fiscal position is very important for us to maintain because this is going to establish the readiness of Indonesia for so many shocks that may happen from the international, from the global economy. As I said earlier, the budget is, we always use the term, budget is our shock absorber in order to maintain the resiliency of the economy in keeping from the global turbulence. So I believe that a lot of you are paying attention to who are paying attention to the Indonesian budget will be able to follow our budget implementation on monthly basis because we talk to the press and we announce the budget situation from time to time. What are we seeing what do we see in the last quarter of our budget implementation? Ladies and gentlemen, if we look at the commodity prices in 2024, the commodity prices in 2024 is slightly lower compared to the commodity prices in early 2023. With that, we are looking at the revenues that are a little bit of contraction. And of course, this is something that we have to pay attention very, very well, but we are very happy to see that our non-tax revenue is actually on the positive growth. By the way, I believe that next week we will, from the Ministry of Finance, we will announce the April budget position by next week. This is the end of March. On the expenditure side, we have a strong spending on the first quarter of 2024. And the reason is because the government has the election, which we did not have in 2023, so that in terms of the budget absorption, this is one-time budget absorptions, one-time budget spending that is taking place only in 2024. The government also increased the government salary and also pension in the first quarter starting January 2024, so that there is increase in the expenditure. And this has already contributed to the first quarter economic growth of 2024. Now, we believe that the budget implementation is on track, and as I said earlier, budget is one thing that is we will continue to maintain so that it continue to serve as the shock absorber for the many global turbulences that Indonesia has to face. Now, the situation of that we are very resilient, I believe, is not taking place in 1 or 2 years. If we look at Indonesia's experience in the last 2 decades, we have learned a lot from our experience. The economic stability and resilience, they don't take place overnight. In fact, if I list it, what we have already done since the Asian financial crisis, you will see that Indonesia has already established a lot. 25 years ago, Indonesia was in the Asian financial crisis. And then we improved a lot. 1998, banking sector law, 1999, the fiscal decentralization law, the independence of the central bank was established 25 years ago. 2023, public finance law, the treasury law, constitutional court, labor law was established in 2003. 2004, the public finance accountability social security system law was established there. Direct presidential election was in 2004. And then after that, a lot of reforms that we conducted. And then moving forward, jump directly to the last couple of years, you see in 2020, even during the COVID period, we established the Omnibus Law on job creation. We work with our parliament, we work with our legislatives to establish a law, the job creation law. And 2021, we come up with a new tax law that also provide the fundamental for us to establish, including the carbon tax, which is already approved. And then fiscal decentralization law, and just last year we introduced the new law on the financial sector omnibus law. These are the trajectory of Indonesia, that is the continuous effort of Indonesia to reform and establish the economic environment that is prospective and to attract business attention. Now, there are 3 things that are very important to improve in the future Indonesia. We are looking at this, we are looking at the regulatory framework, and then what are really it aims for. Number one of these 3, number 1 is improving the human capital of Indonesia. And that is why the state budget spending is spending a lot. We have a mandatory 20% of government spending on education. We always spend very high percentage on the health. Greater than 5% of our budget is spent on health. And then a lot of other initiatives, including the establishment of education endowment fund to send our younger generation to find advanced degrees domestically as well as abroad. Our education endowment fund, which is usually abbreviated as LPDP, scholarship right now already funded more than 45,000 individuals, our younger generation, 45,000 of them been financed by the LPDP scholarship. Right now, the amount of money, this is like a sovereign fund that we have is around 9 billion US dollar, and we are committed to use this to for the betterment of future Indonesian human capital. And not only the human capital, the second investment that is also very, very important for Indonesia is the infrastructure investment. And we have already spent a lot for this infrastructure investment starting in somewhere around 10 years ago. So this is the amount of budget. We are looking at the budget from 2013 until now, and you see the trajectory of our spending on these four major spending function. And of course, if you look at the education is the blue line, and that is the 20% of the budget. The social protection is the red line. It is, if you look at that during the COVID, which is the shaded area, the gray shaded area, during the COVID, our social protection increased a lot. Our health spending is also increasing a lot. But then as we move out of the pandemic, we are trying to put the social protection as well as our health spending back on this long-term trajectory plan. And the infrastructure is something that's a little bit declined during the pandemic. But again, as we move out of the pandemic, we are putting it in the long-term trajectory level as well. So on the infrastructure, you can see a lot. The Java Island is connected with the highways. Sumatra is almost connected, also by roads and highways. The train in the Sulawesi, the connectivity in Papua, airports and seaports in many different parts of Indonesia. We are also investing a lot in the digital infrastructure. We are investing a lot in the technology. Despite that, the needs for infrastructure spending is still very, very high. This is one area where Indonesia will still have to invest a lot. So, coming back, number one is the human capital. Number two is the infrastructure. Number three is the institutional capital of Indonesia, especially in the government is the bureaucratic reform. Bureaucracy reform is very important. We have central government, local governments that continue. It is very imperative that the two governments, central and local governments, continue to be in close relation and very close in one direction for the whole Indonesia. It is very important that the involvement of the executive branch, the legislative branch, and we are looking forward to the new set of parliament and new set of government in the next couple of months, especially in October. We are looking forward for Indonesia as a prospective place to do business. Right now, we have just started the preliminary discussions with our parliament for the 2025 budget. We started the discussion yesterday, and I believe that some of you who are paying attention to the media have already see that some indicative numbers that we are proposing to the parliament for 2025 macroeconomic indicators. We are, for the economic growth, we are expecting next year our economic growth will be in the range of 5.1 to 5.5%, inflation 1.5 to 3.5%, exchange rate, interest rate. Interest rate is the government bonds of 10 years. Indonesia crude oil price, there is a typo, not the growth price, but the oil price, the oil lifting, the natural gas lifting, and some of the development indicators, including the level of poverty, Gini ratio, unemployment rate, human capital index, farmer and fishermen's exchange rates, that these numbers together with the government work plan for 2025 will be discussed with the parliament in 1 month period until next month. So the discussion with the parliament, this is going to trigger the discussion with the parliament, and the discussion is the preliminary discussions before the government put together the 2025 proposed budget, which will be submitted by President in August to the parliament. Of course, this is something that we expect will ensure the continuity of Indonesian economy, the continuity of the Indonesian development, and we believe that Indonesia is very well on the track. Ladies and gentlemen, let me use the last 5 minutes to share with you some of my view about the new economic growth areas that Indonesia should be encountering. This is part of the global event, but it will be very important that Indonesia should be able to find the place and also find the opportunities there. The new economic growth areas, I believe, is facilitated by a number of events. Number one is the digitalization of our development. Not only the economic development, but the digitalization of many of our life. I believe this is opening new rooms for economic growth, new businesses, new opportunities, and this is something that digitalization can improve our innovation, and it is also to improve our creativity, and at some point it will have positive impact on the economic productivity of a nation. This is where Indonesia will have to compete and have to master the digitalization. Number two is the green economic development. Sustainability and green economic development is a room where Indonesia is also can offer new business opportunity. A lot of, if we talk like 5 years ago or 10 years ago or even 20 years ago, we talk about the green economy, and the immediate thought was the extra cost. I don't believe that. Right now, green economy is a new business adventure. Indonesia is offering the logic of the energy transition. We are working very close with the JETP, Just Energy Transition Partnership, with a number of countries. Indonesia is offering blended finance for the energy transition mechanism. Indonesia is offering a lot to the world because we are one of the largest forest country with the largest forest in the world. We are offering a lot of business opportunity on the green and sustainability. The other thing that is the rooms for economic growth in the future is that domestic micro, small, medium enterprises. And this is very important. The more domestic that we produce, the more multiplier that we can get. This is not to say that Indonesia should come to the protectionism stance. Indonesia, we have already proven ourselves that we would like to embrace the world. The last couple of weeks, you read in the newspapers how Indonesia has already planned to join the OECD. And this is our plan to become part of the global economy. We are very active in a lot of international organizations. Despite that, we would like to see our micro, medium, and small enterprises to come up. And we would like to make sure that even if I look at the Indonesian budget, we keep on asking the questions. What is the percentage of this budget that is spent on the domestic goods and services? It is something that we're going to continue to ask without having to slip toward the protectionism kind of stance. And then finally is the downstreaming. Natural resource downstreaming is very important for us. We believe that natural resources are one feature that differentiates Indonesia from a lot of other countries in the world. Indonesia is natural resource rich, and we have to make sure that it is not only exported as raw materials. We have to continue with the downstreaming. We continue with the smelter. We continue with the downstreaming manufacturing. All in all, in order to provide the extra and greater value added in the country. But natural resources is something that we have to pay attention very, very carefully and design the regulatory environment in order to push for the downstreaming in the country. And last but not least is our financial sector development. It is very important that Indonesia, that is why the new law on the omnibus law on the financial sector 2023 was established in order to make sure that we can continue with the financial deepening, financial inclusion, and also the financial stability of the country. Three most important features, three most important pillars of our financial sector development. The financial deepening, which is the growth, the financial inclusion, which is expanding the financial services toward bigger and larger number of Indonesians, serving all segments of Indonesian population, and financial stability, where the four institutions are working hand in hand for the Indonesian financial sector development, stability, inclusion, and deepening. The Ministry of Finance, the Central Bank of Bank Indonesia, our Financial Supervision Agency, OJK, and also our Deposit Insurance Corporation, the LPS. We are working hand in hand in order to make sure that financial stability is continue to be here in Indonesia, and we would like to ask you to continue your business, continue your endeavor, look at new opportunities, because you are, all the business sectors, you are the one who creating the welfare. If I look at the Indonesian GDP right now, around 21,000 trillion Indonesian rupiah, the government is about 3,300. The remaining 17,000 trillion are created by the households, are created by the business sectors like you are here, are created by our exporters. So it is very important that the government regulation is put in place in order for the household, in order for the community at large, in order for the business sectors to be able to continue their business and continue their spending. I hope that you will get a lot of insights from the DBS conference today, and I wish you all health and success in all lines of business that you have. Thank you once again for the DBS, and have a good day.
Kami ucapkan terima kasih, mohon berkenan tetap berada di atas panggung, Prof. Izin tetap berada di panggung, Prof, untuk menerima token of appreciation. We'd like to invite Bapak Lim Chu Chong as President Director PT Bank DBS Indonesia to join us on stage to deliver a token of appreciation untuk Bapak Profesor Dr. Suhasil Nazara, Vice Minister of Finance. Terima kasih Prof untuk insight-nya hari ini. Sehat selalu. Dan kami ingin mengundang tentunya sekali lagi bergabung untuk berfoto. Berfoto terlebih dahulu Bapak Kunardili dan Ibu Melfrida Gultom. Mohon izin kita berfoto bersama lagi. Silahkan. Sambil kami ingatkan kepada Bapak Ibu sekalian untuk masuki sesi berikutnya dapat scan QR yang berada di meja masing-masing untuk mengikuti sesi tanya jawab dan juga Anda bisa vote pertanyaan yang paling disukai. Baik, terima kasih. Thank you very much ladies and gentlemen. Terima kasih. Silakan kembali ke tempat. You may return to your seats. Terima kasih banyak. What a wonderful insight. Thank you.